eventually Trey agreed to see me, and I got a job.
Cool. What was your first position there?
I was both pastry plater. It's a weird combination. I plated the pastries and I shucked oysters. And I remember to this day the drawer with 3 third pans of different ice creams and sorbets in it. That invariably oyster shells would fall into. It was just a terribly designed station.
It's like, all right, I'm on the ice cream and oyster station.
Ice cream and oysters. So you do these chocolate souffle cakes, and you would do these pastries like creme brulee Napoleons with I don't know if you ever seen the layered phyllo, and all that sort of jazz, and then oysters for some reason.
Okay. And then, do you know then in your heart that I'm going to move up in this kitchen and I'm going to be aggressive in my upbringing? I
would say that I was voracious in my quest for knowledge. I didn't go to culinary school, and I sort of always had that.
Do you feel a little behind?
I always felt behind. I feel behind all the time.
Me too.
So what I would do is I'd go to the library in La Jolla before work, and I'd read whatever I could. But I'd also go to the bookstore in La Jolla, buy a book, take it to work and photocopy it all, and then return the book and get another book because I couldn't afford to buy a bunch of books.
Hell yeah!
So I learned to cook a lot that way. Trey really gave me a lot of ability to do specials and stuff. I can remember the first specials I ever did there.
Yeah.
I remember he still gives me a hard time about I did this beet soup. It was a red beet soup with a horseradish whipped cream or something. Something like that, which I'm sure probably tasted okay, but I remember it spilled on the carpet and some guest got it on him. I remember it was it was an issue. But I'll tell you the honest to God truth is for the first several years of my career, I always was this isn't for me. Not that I didn't love cooking, but the trajectory of a cook it's a tough path.
Oh, for sure.
And I was a little older than some because I didn't really start at it until after college, really. And I was always you encounter a lot of people you don't like.
Yep.
I worked with some chefs who I really, as human beings in their souls, I did not like. And you just start asking yourself, not to skip too far ahead, but I worked for someone in San Francisco where I remember making, I don't know, $8 an hour, living in San Francisco, not having enough money at any one time to go shopping. I could buy one thing or 2 things, but I couldn't I never had enough of anything.
No.
And I remember just being maybe I'm just done. So the first several years of cooking, I genuinely wasn't sure if it was for me.
It's almost like the boot camp, the true test. Are you willing to do this?
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of those times when I was thinking about doing this podcast, I was thinking about the questions I was going to ask you, and I'm I got to ask him if he ever felt like this is not for me.
All the time. I quit cooking at one point. Completely quit cooking for over a year.
Okay, got you. I heard that.
Yeah.
So you're cooking at George's, and then what station do you go to after oysters and ice cream?
So I'm doing oysters and pastries. I think I get on Garde Manger, hot apps or something.
Yeah. Is there any cooks or formative sous chefs there that you're
I'd say all those guys. I remember a guy named Acha. They called him Acha because his nose was like a hatchet. Acha. I mean, these were all with the exception of myself and a guy named Tony Sekviar, who's now the chef of Protégé. It was not a kitchen of aspiring culinarians.
Okay.
It was guys who knew how to cook.
It was a pirate ship.
It was a pirate ship.
Yeah.
And these guys, a guy like Acha, talk about the lessons learned in the kitchen. A guy like Acha almost died. He had to go back to Mexico. He almost died coming over the mountains to get back in the country.
Yeah.
And I was a kid of some means from suburban Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's why, the idea of meritocracy within kitchens, the idea of it's one of the few places in the world where people of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds can coexist well. There's very few. I've always believed that's one of the real beauties of the thing.
When you walk through the back door, it's all classes erased.
Yeah.
All lines are blurred.
It's like that guy who was the sauté cook had started as a dishwasher 10 years earlier. That's still, I'd like to think that's still possible in restaurants.
Oh, for sure. It definitely is. Yeah. It definitely
that's
is.
Why I always, I've gotten in some trouble because I take umbrage with the idea that that restaurants are inherently racist places.
Yeah.
While we all agree that, at least I certainly agree that there's systemic racism at play that prohibits inclusion and access, which is the reason behind the scholarship.
Yeah.
We can talk about. I believe that there's something incredibly valuable and deeply American almost and egalitarian about restaurants.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so, how long did you work there?
I worked at George's for 2 years, and then I went to France. I actually came back and worked for another year for him.
Got you. What made you go to France?
For me, it was go to culinary school or go to France. I just wanted some sense of background.
I learned classic cooking.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was by no means, even in that era, it still wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
There was great cooking in the U.S. There was just as much stuff starting to happen in Spain. Could have gone anywhere. But for me, like with all things, it's as much about the life experience as anything.
Now, how did you set that up? Was there visa? Was there?
There was a guy. There was a guy named Ryan who trained me at George's, who was about, in retrospect, but I hope he's not listening, but 200, he was a very large homosexual man.
Yes.
Who, I remember Trey yelling at me, the chef yelling at me to bend from my knees because I would bend from my waist, and Ryan, who was on like the meat station, was like staring at my ass and would burn shit.
Yeah.
So Trey was always like, bend from the knees because so anyways, Ryan was a lovely guy. He actually ended up becoming a butcher in San Diego. He had staged at this place called L'Abbaye de Sainte-Croix, which is a 1-star Orleans chateau, which isn't there anymore. And he set up that first stage, stage, which was a 6-month stage over the course of a summer, in Salon de Provence, which is obviously in Provence on this mountaintop sort of setting, really lovely. And that was my entree to France, and I was able to use the paperwork I got from that to do a few more stages during that first trip.
Yeah. Whoa. So, do you know where you wanted to work?
No.
Or were you like, I'm just going to look up the best restaurants and try to get there?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it ended up being. I mean, I had to fulfill that first 6 months, which became really difficult because the chef never changed the menu. It was that was torture. Like the latter 3 months of that experience were torture. I lived with a guy who was a buddy of mine named Lisandro Manuel Martinez, who was from Argentina. And we just got thrown together in this room in this sort of dorm space that used to be like the barn of the monks.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing used to be this monk's abbey. It was really cool. Great dude. And we just we had the time of our lives.
That's awesome.
But after a few months, it was like, oh my God, I got to do something. But I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out of my deal, my stage there. So we just we drank a lot of cheap wine.
I heard that.
Endured.
Yeah. What kind of food were you doing? What
it was
things?
Provençal, but it was there was examples of the worst part of French cooking. There,
okay.
Where there's a lot of artifice and maybe not as much. You see this sometimes amongst older chefs in France. Sometimes a lack of reverence of products. We'd bring in these beautiful loup de mer, break them down, and then vacuum and freeze them. Or we'd bring in pumpkins from the fall, and he'd clean them up, vacuum and freeze them, and be doing pumpkin soup in the middle of summer. Weird stuff like that. I had never seen before.
Gotcha.
I learned a lot, but it wasn't my favorite restaurant I've ever worked at.
Gotcha. Would you say that Tres Fichet was a seasonal focused restaurant?
Highly in that, we worked very closely with a very famous farm down there called Chino Farms, and that was a big part of my education. Is I was charged with going to pick up at the farm every morning, which was it was a responsibility, it was an honor. I'm sure for Trey, he just wanted to sleep in.
Yeah.
Half hour go surfing or whatever.
And you're like, he gave me the keys to the restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I was I had been knighted.
I hear you.
And I mean, working with Tom Chino, he let me work in the field sometimes.
Yeah.
That was a very informative part of my training there.
Very cool. So then you move on from this boring restaurant, and where do you go?
I go to Paris. I moved with Lisandro to Paris, and I took a couple quick jobs. I worked at a place called Ep8 du Pont in the 6th for a little bit. I ended up landing at a place called Chez Georges, which is in the 2nd, and it's a very, very old school bistro where, again, I'm not learning crazy techniques, but I'm learning some really cool stuff.
Yeah. How are you getting jobs?
I'm
piecing together some French and Okay.
Knocking on doors. I whatever French I learned in kitchens. I just bootstrapped the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just go knock on doors.
Yeah.
And I worked in this tiny little kitchen there where the garde manger guy also buffed the silver. So you'd be plating something, and then the silver tray would come out of the dish machine, and then you'd polish it.
That's right. That's back in the day when you had a position, you did 3 positions.
Yeah.
The servers heated up the bread. Yeah. You know what I mean? And this guy's buffing the dishes.
I loved, and this place was where it was at the end of a street called Etienne Marcel, which is where all the fashion houses were, all the modeling agencies, all the French Vogue. So everyone who was a model, who was in fashion, who was in publishing, this was a very famous restaurant everyone would come to for lunch. the cigarette and cigar smoke was such it would just sit above your head all the way to the ceiling, and people just had like these long, boozy, sexy lunches. It was a really cool place.
That's crazy.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. And then I worked there for a few months, and then my goal was always to get into a 3-star, so I was able to get in Le Jardin de Sens, which was a 3-star in Montpellier.
How much more effort did that take than your other? This bistro, for example.
In terms of getting the job?
Yeah, just like getting there. Yeah. Was it a lot of standing at the back door, kind of like, hey,
it was a lot of letters, but, like any 3-star restaurant, they're like, sweet, free labor. Or,
exactly. They don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't give for that stage, I lived behind the grease dumpster in a space that was also part of the dry storage.
Yeah.
With like me and 3 Japanese stagiaires.
Yeah.
It was not awesome.
Gotcha. I heard that.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Me and Andre Chang were on Garde-Manger together at Le Jardin de Sens. He ended up staying with the Porcel brothers for like many years.
Yeah.
I did like a 4-month stage.
Yeah.
But it was, to see a kitchen like that work. That was the first kitchen that was like, it was like the tram kitchen. It was like sliding doors. It was gorgeous. I never seen anything like it.
Beautiful.
Everybody's
dressed nice.
It was really cool. It was cool. It was an interesting experience. A lot of yelling.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, too much.
And then I'm sure in French, and you're like, what are they saying?
It was hard. There's no doubt. My French just wasn't that good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then after that, did you feel like, what made you leave there?
It was time to come back to the U.S.
It was time to come back to the U.S. Got you. How long had you been in France at that time?
That time, not that long, like a year and change.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good with.
Did you feel homesick?
No. I just, the French kitchen culture. There's a lot of dumb people.
Yeah.
It's a very slightly misogynistic, chauvinistic, kind of just like, you guys are idiots.
Yeah.
It's not a very enlightened, at the time, I would
Heard
say.
that.
It was not a very enlightened place.
So you left there and you go back to the States.
Come back to the U.S. I went back with Trey for a bit, just to kind of get my feet under me.
Yeah.
I worked for him for years. I kind of a lead cook in Tournant and just worked all the stations.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I need to get up to a city.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to make sure I get the chronology right here. So I moved up to San Francisco. I took a job at Elizabeth Daniel.
Okay.
Daniel Patterson's place.
Yeah.
Which is a great restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It was during the I want to say it was during the .com bust of. It was after that period. So let's see. I was in Provence during 9/11. I can't remember. Anyways, I remember it was a very slow restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It was not doing well, but the food is incredibly precise and very thoughtful. Daniel, is got a master palate.
Yeah,
and understands like how to make very few moves and make things delicious. I just liked more than any experience I've ever had professionally working for him.
Yeah,
I didn't enjoy it whatsoever, and that was when I was like, I think I'm done cooking.
Yeah,
because. There was like things happening in my personal life too at the time that was just like
a lot of shit at once.
A lot of shit. It was it was the not having the ability to pay bills. It was personal stuff happening. It was just not liking Daniel at all.
Yeah.
That I was like, but I ended up going back to France at that time for a girl I was dating at the time was French.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved back, even though I said I was done forever working in France. I ended up back in France. I wasn't going to cook though. I was just going to like hang out a little bit and kind of get my feet under me. And she sold jewelry.
Yeah.
She worked with these people, these folks in Guatemala, like families in Guatemala that make jewelry. She would sell it in like these, they're called marché artisanales, like markets along the water. We lived on the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I'll sell some. I'll hang out with you. We'll like whatever. She ended up getting sick. So I had to cover for her. She ended up having like a tumor and stuff, so that got a little crazy. But in the end, I ended up back in the kitchen, a 2-star that I really enjoyed. A guy named Christian Morrissey, who was very informative in terms of my career and how I look at cooking and managing kitchens. So I was there for some time.
Okay, got you. And then when did you leave France again?
So I was there for another 2 years. The second time around.
Got you.
And then. I need to get on, that point where what got me back cooking was the realization that I had put a lot of time in, that I really enjoyed the work. I knew even then my strength and my success will be with me. I need to be in charge.
Yeah.
And in understanding that, I realized I was far closer to that goal than I was from the beginning of the journey. And
Yes.
the right thing to do was to get
finish.
there.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, come back to the U.S. was about getting there.
Okay.
So I took a sous chef job for Daniel Hum at Camp